I thought we were waiting to get going. Yeah.
No, we're waiting. Oh, yeah, I don't know.
But he's always been like we've communicated a couple times on LinkedIn and stuff, and he's always been super kind.
Great guy. Yeah. I think that's
Cory
the thing that people don't realize. I mean, that's why I always tell people when they're like, "Oh, where do I get started?" I'm like, we don't just say it because we've got a referral program.
Right.
We're like, you need to join this because a lot of the people that you have. A lot of the books you've read on your shelf are people who are affiliated in National Speakers Association, and then they're there, and they will talk to you. I mean, that's how I met Jeffrey Kinnemer, and that's how I met all these guys. It's like that's the same thing with Scott.
Right?
Is great. I had the book Iconic or the distinction. And it's like, well, there he is in front of you.
Right.
And for the most part, they're great people.
Right.
I have met a few a-holes.
Sure.
That I was very disappointed.
Sure.
By I was excited to meet them, and then I met them, and it was like, blow you off, and but I suppose that's like with anybody.
Well, that's the thing about too. If you go,
did the music even come on? I think we started the show. It was real mellow.
It was right.
I don't know. Have we taken two steps back here?
We were
doing so well. It kind of came and went.
He was playing a little Sade, a little smooth operator.
Something. It was low key. Well, don't mind us, folks. You are at the right destination. If you are looking for a business growth podcast, you have found it. In fact, you found the Grow Business Podcast. I'm your host, Cory Mosley. Joined by my co-host, LG007, Lon Graham is here.
Voice of reason.
It's good to be here, Cory.
Yes, and the guy that we're complaining about early on in the show, less than 2 minutes in, is none other than Willie H is on the boards today.
Hit the buttons, William.
And he's going to be hitting those buttons efficiently. If you were wondering what we were babbling about before we started hitting record, sometimes we don't want it. It's not hot mics. I mean, we know generally what's coming on, but talking about a fantastic organization, National Speakers Association, NSA for short, and not that NSA.
Right.
So we led with National Speakers Association. If you are a business owner that is certainly interested in the business of speaking, if you're trying to speak better, Toastmasters, organizations like that. If you're interested in the business of speaking, maybe you're running a business now and you want to, start educating and what you've done, or maybe you've developed some techniques. This is unsolicited; they're not a sponsor.
Right.
But National Speakers Association, what we were talking about, a great place to meet some great people.
Yeah.
But on today's show, we're going to be talking about ways to grow your business. That is our mission. Based around my 5 pillars of business growth, I believe that every business growth challenge falls into one of these 5 pillars. You know what they are, LG?
Do I know what they are?
Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
Mindset, sales, marketing, operations, and people.
Do you have that? Is that written down?
Well, I wrote them in order.
For shame. Okay.
Well,
that was in order. You were going in order, and you were kind of glancing for those that are not watching us on YouTube or streaming us on video. But
usually I bounce around, and you're like, you don't know the order?
Yeah, correct.
And so
correct.
I put them,
I mean, that is on the aptitude. That is on the co-host aptitude tests.
I know them. I'm just trying to learn the order now.
Okay. Well, we're a little bit past that episode, whatever we're on right now. Should it be a little past that? But at any rate, we base that on 5 pillars of business growth, which is based on my book, Position for Growth. Available on Amazon or CoryMosley.com. Encourage you to get your copy, or as my friend Willie Jolly says, buy 2 copies.
Right.
One for you and one for a business colleague who could learn from getting positioned for growth.
Yes, indeed.
So, all right. What are we talking about today? What pillar do you think we're going on today? You had redeemed yourself last week, although I'm still suspicious that you were looking at my you glanced past my screen. I got to put one of these privacy. I'm getting one of these bank privacy screens. So you walk by. But what's your guess this week?
I'm way past that, because if I actually know what we're talking about, I'll start thinking of things to say and I'll just mess up.
Oh yeah. So much easier to be the voice of reason extemporaneously. Right?
Exactly.
Like,
That's right.
What's I talking about?
That's right. So we talked about marketing last time. Let's talk about people this time.
Okay, we're not doing that. So that's good news. Good news. Back in the doghouse. Happy to report. I thought with a lot of the, I'm going to call it volatility.
Okay.
So this allows me to remain apolitical.
Correct.
Right? Some people love it. Some people don't. Whatever. With all the volatility and uncertainty,
correct,
that some people may be feeling, I thought it'd be good to focus on operations, but more specifically, talk financial.
Okay.
Smart cost cutting.
Okay.
Versus growth investing. So, maybe looking at some areas where you might want to look at cutting expenses without stunting your business growth.
Correct.
So, a lot of people are talking more about this kind of chainsaw approach to things that are happening, versus a scalpel versus, and I think that happens a lot in corporate.
Correct. Especially in corporate,
right. It's a shock to the system from a governmental standpoint. But in corporate, it's very, we read all the time, right? Amazon cutting, 1,500 jobs, 15,000 jobs.
Right.
Then 2 weeks later, somebody's hiring 10,000, so it's a cyclical thing for objectives, and it's never fun to be out of work. But with that uncertainty, because if people aren't spending or those things happen across the business community, whether you're a restaurant, the team went to lunch last week and mozzarella sticks were $13.
Lord have mercy.
On the menu.
Woo.
And I just thought that was a little excessive for mozzarella sticks. Now, again, I don't know the cost of cheese. I don't know the cost of transportation. I don't know what. We live in inflationary times, as they say. But that cost enough that made me skip it.
Okay.
So where I might have had, and I'm trying to live right, but putting that aside, let's forget about staying alive and not clogging your arteries. But forget that for a second.
Right.
Where I might have normally come in and said, "Oh, great, let's get the appetizer, and let's, and I'm going to get my regular, lunch, whatever." Right. It was $13 for fried cheese.
Right. Well, and that's that threshold, right? That's what you're talking about. Is
correct.
There is a threshold that you'll say, "Okay, I'll pay it. I'll pay." Ooh.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Now I got to second guess it. Yeah, sure.
100%.
To where you are paying attention, where you might not have been paying attention later. And I've never been that, but I'm hyper aware of an eating out menu, because I'm just like, this is egregious.
Right.
So with that comes people making other decisions, right?
100%.
And maybe people choosing not to eat out as a restaurant owner, not the ideal scenario for you.
Right.
That could be, people. If you're a travel agent, if you're in the vacation business, if you're in any of those pockets, there are some challenges. And I think it's important there's nothing wrong with re-examining your expenses, right? Again, without going too far into the politics, most people might say, oh, the government was bloated. The question is this the way to go about de-bloating it?
Right, exactly.
Where you're finding out maybe people's jobs are more essential than you thought, or those kinds of things. So I thought from a business perspective, it might be worth taking a look at some smart ways to go about it. So you're also not, and I've had clients who are like, I just cancel. I had some automotive clients, like Auto Trader, a big name in shopping for a used car.
Right.
So I'd have some clients like, oh, you know what? I canceled Auto Trader. And then my question would be, oh, what? Were they not performing? Was the numbers not converting? I just didn't feel like it was worth it.
Right.
I'm like, what a terrible way to make the decision. So, that gut can be a gift, and going with your gut can be a curse too.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Well, look, I think the perfect example of that is there's a company in town that just recently built their headquarters, CoStar. And they're talking about, on one hand, they're talking about laying off 1,200, whatever the numbers are. But so they're talking about laying off 1,200 people. They're also talking about, in another area, hiring 1,000 people.
That's right.
Well, what that means is that they realize that there are some areas that aren't as essential as they either used to be, or just aren't performing in the way that they need them to. They also realize that some other investments that they need to make.
Right.
So to your point, without sacrificing growth or revenue, or without sacrificing your core business, what are some things you can do so that you can be more efficient and more effective with your investments?
That's right. This might be a guy I want to work with. Yeah, there you go. There you go. This could be. So I thought we'd jump in. There's a lot of information, and maybe we'll break this in a couple parts and come back and revisit it. But
sure.
I thought we'd maybe look at kind of paring down like some of the biggest cost-cutting mistakes.
Okay.
Let's talk about it that way, right? Yeah. Because a lot of times people hear information, they hear what they want to hear.
Right.
Oh, great. I listened to the podcast. Cory said we got to start cutting expenses. And now all of a sudden, guys can't log in, their Zoom doesn't work or like something, you know? So I think looking at that. So I think number one, cutting marketing and sales efforts.
100%.
You know, Cory, we're going to stop advertising so we can save that money.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
Not
I don't know. Does it work that way? I don't know. It works that way. So cutting marketing and sales efforts. I mean, that is the lifeblood of business growth. And so many people, I think, don't understand the opportunity and how many people accelerate because people get scared and decelerate.
Right.
They go, oh, look, let's cut everything and then wait and see what happens while there's somebody else going to step on the gas. There's a shift.
Right.
Right? Yeah, it's like watching the track. The tracks are so interesting. I was watching some college track live in person with a good friend of mine. His daughter was competing. So we were watching some indoor stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, it's when you think about the track and where everyone's position is, it looks kind of out of place.
Right.
When they're lined up in these different angles.
Right.
And then when they're coming around, but then when you see how it comes together when they straighten out, and all of a sudden somebody's just blown past everybody.
Right.
And this gap starts to widen. You know, they're running, what is it, the 400? So you're going around. So, like you see, and then I started watching this one girl, and it was her race. There wasn't anybody. I thought she was going to lap one of these girls that was running.
Right.
Like, it was her race. She was just gone.
Okay.
She shouldn't have been that fast amongst the other people. Like, I would quit if I was one of these people that were there, because chances are this girl's going to show up at every relay in my, you know, don't get me lying about my understanding of sports, but in their competition class or region or however the collegiate, however, but
like if I'm there, she's there, and I got something to worry about.
Yeah, why am I bothered? I mean, this girl was smoking people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like a lot of times the competition, the edge can change.
Yes. We
think it's overnight, but it wasn't, right? It was a decision you made 6 months ago that is now caught up to you, or a decision a competitor made to zig when you were zagging, maybe. And I think it's just so important that that's not the first place you go looking.
Well, I think what happens is this, and especially business owners that don't have either a sales background or leaders that don't have a sales background, they are more of an operations background.
Right.
So it's more, they look at things more in terms of direct profit and direct loss. And they look at sales and marketing as a light switch that you can either turn off or on. And the reality of it is there may be some things in sales and marketing that aren't working for you.
Right.
And you can adjust those or maybe get rid of some of that. Yeah. But you can't turn it all off and expect to keep generating revenue.
That's right.
Which is the point I think that you're making.
Well, and then because you shut it down.
Right.
And then you want to restart it.
Right.
And then wondering why it takes 6 months to ramp back up.
Oh, momentum is the hardest thing to keep going, is to get going.
Yeah.
You know, I use the airplane analogy a lot, is it takes an airplane, going down the runway, they've got to build up momentum so that they can get enough momentum to get up into the air. And then they've got to get to cruising altitude.
That's right.
Once they're at cruising altitude, it takes a lot less energy to keep going. But it's that initial activity, all the work it takes to get up to a point where you can then, benefit from all the effort that you did. So if you stop and start, you're a lot of times you're starting from behind because somebody else didn't.
Right. No, 100%.
Voice of reason.
All right, number 2, laying off key employees and losing valuable expertise.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's making a decision about, I don't like the word human assets because I think that dehumanizes the people that are in your organization. But, for lack of a better term, you have people in your organization that have something to offer. Yeah. And if you're getting rid of a role, is getting rid of them as part of that? Are you getting rid of them as part of that role, or are you getting rid of them because they're not the most effective in your company?
Now, I have a good friend of mine. She says, Michelle Peterson, she says that everyone is replaceable over time.
Correct.
But I've seen so many people make knee-jerk decisions.
Right.
Particularly when we talk about the small business community. Right. Now, the corporations, they have, different guidelines. You can't just fire somebody at Amazon, right? There's 82 processes, write-ups, pips, all these other stages that you have to go through to do that versus it's my company and you know what, get out of here. Right. I worked with car dealers for 15 years. So that was a very easy thing. And then nobody wants the lawsuit. But what I find interesting in that world is not really understanding what role or impact somebody has.
Correct.
Particularly if your company is of size where you've got multiple layers and it's kind of like, oh, you know what, we need to reduce the workforce by 13%. Bring me the recommendations. But maybe the people bringing you the recommendations also don't know the value of that person until after. Then it's, get me this. Who? Why don't I have this? Who used to do that? Oh, that's what they used to do. They used to do that. And they used to do this, and they were doing that.
Right. Well, and this is something that I talk about a lot to sales leaders, and this is where it applies. When you're asking other people to provide recommendations, we tend to focus on what people do wrong because it's easier to identify than to choose from all of the things that they do right. And what happens is when we're asking somebody to choose how we reduce these people, they tend to focus on what these people are doing wrong, and lose sight of the fact that when you get rid of them, you also lose all the good. And I think that's what you're saying is that, are you making decisions about the right things when you get rid of people? Right.
No, 100%. So we're covering the biggest cost-cutting mistakes to avoid: cutting marketing and sales efforts, to laying off key employees and losing valuable expertise. Because that's important. Oh, great, I can, we see this with like TV shows as kind of a adjacent like analogy.
Okay.
Like, some great shows, but the longer they go on, the more expensive they get, right? The bonuses kick in. So a lot of times people think their shows are getting canceled just because nobody's watching them. No. There's just been a cost-benefit analysis. It's just cheaper to greenlight a new show than it is to go into the 7th season of something where now there's bonuses and back end and all of those things. So now your show goes bye-bye, not because it wasn't a great show anymore, but just the math ain't mathing.
Well, you start to get residuals and how long you're paying them for life now and all that.
Right. So someone goes, okay, great. Oh, we can replace this job for cheaper.
Correct.
But new broom sweeps clean. Old broom knows where to go, though.
Old broom knows what to sweep.
Sweep. So, all right.
Good. When the church say amen.
Definitely.
Well said.
Next, eliminating customer experience investments that keep clients loyal.
Yes.
And I see this now with changes in like loyalty programs.
100%.
And points and rewards and things of that nature that have been, in some cases eliminated, slowly taken away, augmented, no longer to the benefit of the consumer, or people coming up with like crappy ideas that they think is them doing something,
Well, and are you listening to the people that are participating in these rewards too? If you make a decision to change something. And what was it? Delta a couple of years ago completely revamped their rewards program, their frequent flyer program.
Right. MSQs, MSMs, MSW.
And all of it. And then they got a huge feedback and backlash from their mid to upper tier flyers. Their maximum, their best flyers were the ones that benefited the most.
Right.
But the people that were that middle to that 50 to 75% of their mileage of their revenue made a lot of noise, like, this doesn't work for us.
Right.
So they went back, to their credit, they went back and reevaluated it. This is the point that you're making, Cory, though, is are you getting rid of something that keeps people coming back? Because if you get rid of it, they're not going to keep coming back.
That's right.
And when they stop coming back, same thing with sales and marketing.
Right.
If you're not generating activity, you're losing revenue.
Oh, we're going to cut the samples. We're not giving you more samples.
Right.
I mean, that just drives business. So, so a lot of times it's just silly season. Oh, we'll bring it back later. Employee morale was heavily affected through COVID.
Yes.
Because what businesses stopped doing, they stopped doing Christmas parties. They stopped doing those things in the name of COVID.
Correct.
And then once that passed, they saw it as an opportunity to save the money.
Correct.
And never do it. And many companies never brought that stuff back. They never brought the outings or the holiday parties or any of this stuff.
Right.
They used COVID to eliminate it and never brought it back. And I think that's a mistake in terms of team building outside of work hours
Right.
and team building just in general in terms of creating. There are still, now, if you're in a job sector that, there aren't as many jobs for
Right.
what you do. But believe you me, people are still getting headhunted. People are still, depending on what you do and when you fit in the ecosystem, there are people who want you.
Yes.
And there are people who are being, poached and that's still happening.
Correct.
So, there has to be, yeah. I wasn't even thinking about you at that point, but I'm just saying that the point is that people are out there. So so thinking you don't have to do any of that stuff anymore, or that's not it's the Anton Gunn talks about, right? One of his elements of what an organization gets asked is, do they care about me?
Correct.
Do I feel that they care about me?
Correct. And here's the thing too, Cory, in addition to what you're talking about, the people they're poaching aren't the worst ones on your team. They're poaching. They're going after the people that are high performers.
It's not, I'm so glad that person's gone.
Correct.
The top salesperson.
Like I was going to get rid of them anyway.
Yeah,
so
correct. You took that off my hands. Right.
Well, and that's exactly right. And so it's a disproportionate impact, because if they take one of your best performers, then that's a disproportionate. You just didn't lose a person. You lost the value that person brought to the organization.
Yep.
And so this goes back to your point. Be careful where you're cutting costs when it comes to community building.
Yep.
Now, you may do it a little bit differently, but don't give it up entirely. You want to continue to build community within your organization.
Well, it's just like, we did a couple years ago, we did some jerseys for a church softball league.
Oh, yeah.
And so we agreed to sponsor the jerseys. And I'm like, we picked out jerseys and we picked out hats too. I said, well, good luck on the hats.
Right.
I'm taking care of the jerseys.
Right.
So you can still, I still did my community involvement, but there's still a budget.
Correct.
Right. So that was going to exceed my budget for this. Right. So instead of me going, I'm just going to cut community involvement.
Right.
It was okay. Well, you can love those hats, look great. Design looks good.
Right.
So you're just going to need a second sponsor to do the hats.
Right.
Because I got the jerseys, but I'm not doing both. So it's not that situation where, again, you don't want to be closed-minded. You can make adjustments. You could redistribute, or, hey, I can't do as much as I did here, but I still want to do something.
Right.
And cut back, but not eliminate or cut out.
Well, and this is a great example of how you can build community in your organization, is say, look, we got to make some changes about what we're supporting or sponsoring in the community.
Sure.
We've got a little bit different budget now.
Right.
What are some ideas about things that we can do with what we have available to do that?
Correct.
And then if you do something that somebody suggested, now it becomes, reinforces that sense of community. Right. And so creative ways to do that is great, but you don't just shut it off. And it's hard to shut off anything that you're already doing.
Right. And again, in this context, customer experience, things of that nature, like BMW used to do track days. So they'd go around the country and set up at, I think the last one we were at was at where the Redskins, no, whatever they're called, the Commanders. Sorry, lost my head. Not the Redskins, the Commanders. It was at their, that field. But they did this tour again, COVID,
Right.
and then it's like, okay, people really love that.
Right.
Now, I don't know how you quantified it. I don't know if it sold you a bunch of cars, but what it did do is it kept people connected to the vehicle. So if you were a longtime customer too, you got an opportunity to see, touch, and drive without the car sales experience or process.
Right.
And a variety. And then, that visibility has some ROI to it. So
there's a level of connection to it for sure.
Because otherwise you shouldn't have done it in the first place if you're going to snatch it back, because people enjoyed it. All right, number 4, and then we're going to move on.
Okay.
Then we're going to move on to how to identify good versus bad costs.
Sure.
So the last one, just here in this 4, marketing sales efforts, key employees, customer experience investments. And the last one was delaying necessary technology upgrades to improve that will improve efficiency.
Okay.
So we're going to keep the crappy system that people hate because it's a little tight right now. So the thing that would get us better, and we saw this with COVID. So many restaurants got punished because they had kicked the can down the hill on online ordering.
Right.
And they were scrambling. Then those infrastructures became overwhelmed.
Correct.
And then the experience suffered. because it was such an influx in the technology. Like, I mean, like even you think of like Zoom was crashing for a while. Like Zoom had to get it together. They had to have all hands on deck because it exploded so much. So don't put off. Now, I understand if your restaurant is down 50%. Well, it's all a hedge.
Right.
Your restaurant's down 50%. Is that the time to renovate?
Right.
There's a debate there, right?
Correct.
Is your restaurant down 50% because the food sucks or because people, Wendy's is a great example.
Okay.
Now, I don't know where they are in the hierarchy in the big chains. They're probably third. Maybe it's McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's.
Right.
I'm not sure. Certainly McDonald's owners make more revenue, but Wendy's still makes it. I mean, again, I am living right. I'm trying to live better, healthy lifestyle. But old Cory,
right? I
like a Frosty.
Oh yeah.
I thought I love the chili was good, and a nice Dave single.
Oh yeah.
If you eat fast food,
right?
But we have one by our home that looks terrible.
Yes.
So the assumption is, and their staff matches.
Yeah.
The staff matches the look and feel of the place.
Right. Yeah.
And then now, of course, I think that that lays over into food quality.
It does.
Because if you don't care how your building looks, you don't care how the inside looks, you don't care about the customer experience,
right?
Then if you've got somebody who doesn't care making the food,
right.
I can't imagine the food looks like they cared.
Well, and the psychology of it from a customer standpoint, if you're walking into a place that doesn't look like they care enough to take care of it,
right,
then you're going to have a lower expectation, right. And that lower expectation is going to be fulfilled.
Yeah, because now the burger's going to look overcooked,
right.
and they just threw the lettuce on and barely put a pickle. You didn't even get your 4 pickles or whatever.
Right.
Like it's a whole laissez-faire. So that kept me. I might have had a Wendy's hamburger more frequently,
correct,
than let's say maybe McDonald's, where they still, where depending on what you're getting, they, because Wendy's whole claim to fame is, fresh off the grill,
correct,
right. Whatever.
Right. I mean, I like a good,
but they just wouldn't remodel. So was it the business owner, the Wendy's owner, going, we're not selling enough to justify this remodel, or
right.
How many people are going to Burger King across the street, or
right.
the Cookout, which is across the street from
right.
there, and not going to you because you look like I'm going to get the bubonic plague at your place.
Right. Well, and I saw first.
Would you like a side of Ebola with that hamburger?
Well, in that same vein, I saw first time in my life, I saw a Burger King franchise close, and it was up, by where I used to live, and they had the big round BurgerKing sign.
Yeah.
And it was on the corner of a very busy intersection. But it continued, to your point, it continued to look like it was going downhill and downhill from the outside.
Right.
I never went into it just because
right.
I'm not a fan of that brand.
Yeah.
But you could see the deterioration on the outside, which means that the surprise, and you talk about this all the time, is over time things accumulate. So if you let things go, they get further along and they get worse, and then
right.
you end up like, how did that happen?
That's right.
To your point. Yeah.
You got it. Okay. So don't delay. Don't delay.
Correct.
Willie H., what would we say?
That's just dumb.
Yeah. And that bad. That's the other one. That bad.
Right.
Okay. So good costs versus bad costs.
Yes.
So I think first is essential costs.
Okay.
Those are things that we would identify as directly tied to revenue.
Okay.
Right? Inefficient costs.
Okay.
So subscriptions.
Okay.
Unused.
Yes.
Outdated tools.
Yes.
Redundant processes.
Yes.
And then third, and then just you can jump in on these. And then the third piece is scalable costs.
Okay.
So expenses that grow with the business.
Okay.
In terms of good, we're looking at this in context of good versus bad. So essential, inefficient, scalable.
Correct.
Some people are oversubscribed.
Yeah.
They're paying double for a plan that they're using a fraction of.
Right. Yeah, and to your point, you want to look at, is this, if I cancel this subscription or if I cancel this plan, is it going to cost me or reduce my ability to generate revenue?
Right.
That's a bad cut. Like if you do something that's going to reduce your capacity to generate revenue, that's not a good decision.
Right.
Look for other areas where it won't reduce your capacity to generate revenue. Yeah. Like you said, you've got a subscription that you're not using that's been sitting dormant for 6 months. Well, that's a good one maybe to let go. If you've got some things where you've got 2 subscriptions and one of them now has the capacity to do what the other one, before when you first bought both of them,
right,
one of them didn't have the ability to do what the other one does, and now it does. Get rid of one of them and lean into the other one.
Yeah, no, and like, I mean, I like, like we always say, we're not, right, this podcast is not about us being sages, right, or gurus. It's about, sharing some things that are really in reality. So a great example internally, we don't use the phone a ton.
Right.
So most of the conversations we're having is Zoom based, like particularly if we're talking to prospects or
right,
clients, we're typically on a Zoom, or if they have Teams or whatever, some form of that. So like phones. So we had a whole separate phone system.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That was pretty expensive.
Yeah.
To not really be super active on phones.
Right.
We had Zoom. Zoom releases a phone system.
Oh, wow.
So now we were able to, so for what I was paying for the phone system, by itself, we now have our lines on Zoom, which has the same voice over IP
capacity,
stuff,
right?
Even better because it's integrated into Zoom now,
right?
So everybody's got Zoom lines, Zoom accounts, and Zoom phones for less than what we were paying just for the phones.
Okay.
So that was efficient redundancy there.
100%.
So there are a ton of those examples that people may not be considering because they're busy in the business and not on the business.
100%. And especially since COVID, and you talked about Zoom blew up, and they had to start making offerings, and they had to start creating all this user experience, and they've done a great job. And now they've added phones, but there's a lot of systems and a lot of subscriptions that the business owners and the leaders that are listening to this podcast use that may not realize that those have evolved over the last 3 or 4 years,
right?
Because all they do is use them,
right?
And they don't, they're focused in the business and they use that to keep their day-to-day going. But look at some things like you're talking about. Look at some things that you might be able to combine. Look at some things that you aren't using. Look at some things that maybe you just don't need anymore.
Voice of reason. There you go. I knew you were going to get something there. No, I love that. So if you're ready to do some smart cost cutting.
Correct.
Smart cost cutting, because really you're looking for smart cost cutting strategies that don't hurt growth, right? So 1, negotiate with vendors.
Yeah.
Renegotiate contracts. I literally had this conversation. I had this conversation with a company and just said, I can't pay it.
Right.
It's too much. What else you got for me?
Yeah.
And they reduced the price. I mean, they reduced the price.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, it's and that's everybody.
Yes.
High, low, in between.
Right.
The worst they can say is no, or they can't, and then you can make decisions from there.
Right.
And this applies to the Fortune 500 companies. Just call Verizon about your internet bill, about your cell phone bill, and say, hey, it's times are tough. I don't want to start shopping for another vendor.
Right.
Is there anything you can do for me? I've been overpaying forever. The least you can do is throw brother a bone over here.
That's exactly right.
So negotiate with vendors. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that's a great point. Is if you're working with a vendor and you want to be able to keep that relationship, but you need some help getting through some financial times or some challenges. Ask them what they can do to work with you, because they want to keep you too, especially if you've been with them for over a long period of time. They're going to want to keep you as a client or a customer as well. Yep. So oftentimes they'll work with you, and maybe they offer you an exchange. And this is something that you can do with your clients that come to you too. A lot of times businesses will offer you a little bit lower price if you're willing to sign an extra term.
True.
Like an extra 6 months or an extra year. They'll give you a little bit less. So do it with you if you're willing to commit a little bit longer.
And this is important in reverse too.
100%.
If 2 people will listen to this podcast who do business together.
Right.
So if you get a phone call, folks, a week from now, or somebody's trying to negotiate, do you listen to the Grow Business podcast? Well,
Work with me, brother. Work with me.
That Mosley.
Right.
Mosley and Graham over there cost me money. So you reverse it back, you know.
That's
So
exactly right.
it's a two-way street there.
It is.
Okay, next, leverage automation. So I mean, we talk about this all the time, right? Where can AI, where can chatbots, where can those tools help reduce some of the manual labor costs, right? If you can get a more effective, you know, online situation or you know, use bots and tools, you know, you've got organizations that are reducing their phone.
Correct.
And they kind of talk about this, right? The panic around AI, and very often they say simply is AI won't replace your job.
Right.
If you don't know how to use AI, you could get replaced.
Right. You could get replaced.
Right. Correct.
100%.
Because to me, it's just efficiencies. If I'm an organization that, let's say, is overwhelmed with phone calls,
right.
Well, I don't necessarily need, and something like AI comes in or chatbots or automation comes in, that doesn't mean I need to fire the people. That just means the people who are on the phones can be more effective.
Right.
Instead of being overwhelmed. That means I can take a wait time that people hate from 9, 10, 12 minutes. When Fulton Bank absorbed, I'm trying to remember, Republic Bank, when they bought them and started merging all this stuff together, they didn't bring the customer service people. So if you were dealing with Fulton Bank and you had an issue, you called customer service, you could be on the phone for an hour.
Oh, wow.
Because they were dealing with the accounts and they made you listen only because I deal with Fulton Bank.
Right.
They made you listen to an IVR that's like, if you are a Republic customer that can't log in or can't do this or can't do that, please reset. Please do this.
Right.
Please do. This is before I even got to push 1 to talk to somebody.
They walked you, right, exactly.
So I can only imagine the amount of frustrated customers
100%.
they had that were used to their core service that got turned upside down because they didn't temporarily expand customer service or, you know, hire a firm to take agents and do some basic things. But it was a real tragedy because it really made a headache for everybody. And then, you know what travels downhill.
Right. Well, and this is a great example of what you talked about earlier, Cory, is do you just whack it off? Right. Get rid of the entire customer service, or do you build a strategic plan so that you can be more effective long term? But how do you get there? Again, there's not a light switch. It's not an on-off switch. It's how can you build to being more effective financially? So, and the other thing too, you talk about using these tools. Are you using? And look, I don't want to tell small businesses to stop using, you know, gig workers.
Right. Sure.
But you can use your gig workers more effectively.
Sure.
Or, you know, and we work in the speaking world. There's a lot of speakers that use virtual assistants. Are you maximizing the time that your virtual assistants are working with you? So, and are you taking some things off of their plate that you could do or that you could use technology to do?
That's right.
So that they can be more effective to generate revenue, so that you can focus more on generating revenue.
That's right, 100%. Okay. You know, space optimization is a thing here. So we've got a few people in our building. We're in a big office building that have, you know, resized.
Right.
So they say, hey, you know, we just don't need all this space. We need to shave 1,000 square foot. Now, if you're a commercial real estate property owner, not your favorite thing to do to, you know, reduce rent.
Right.
But that's a creative way also to not upend everything.
Correct.
So if you've got some people that you're letting telecommute or work from home, and that's something you're going to stay with as your own company practice,
right?
Then, you know, looking at that, we've got a lot of people going from mainstream space to co-working operations.
Correct.
And still occupying multiple offices, but still saving money dollar for dollar over, you know, their traditional space.
Right. And that's something that's really done well in our areas, that co-working space.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's an option. Again, do you have to have, are you walking into an empty building every day?
Right.
Well, that's a great thing to look at. And you may talk about inventory, or you may talk about SKUs down the road. So I'll wait for that. But it's, you know, certainly looking at, are you maximizing what you have?
Yeah. Well, that was a good lead in. Refining product and services offerings, right, is under the umbrella where you were going with that. Right. So, you know, a lot of times we talk about, because we've done shows on how to create new revenue, you know, in parallel or within, you know, the tree trunk versus the branches kind of thing. So now the reverse of that, in this context, when we're talking about trying to tighten the belt a little bit or look for smart cost cutting ways is to now, look at what are your most profitable offerings,
correct,
products or services, and drop some of those things.
correct.
Like, during COVID, we worked with several restaurants. One of the first things I went in to look at is what were the lowest performing products where you're carrying inventory but not selling.
Right.
Like, we had a client that had, a bologna burger on his menu.
Right.
And, yes, he can think of those 3-4 customers who love the bologna burger, but that didn't justify.
Right.
And here, the interesting thing there, and I remember this distinctively because it was a good breakthrough, is he sold primarily seafood and barbecue products.
Okay.
So if I was coming in to get, trout, I'd get my trout, I'd get my sides, and, I'd have some bread there.
Right.
Well, to do bologna burgers and things, he was using buns.
Yeah.
So he was using buns. He was using tomatoes and lettuce, things that don't go on barbecue sandwiches.
For sure.
Or in fish boats.
Right.
So now he was carrying bologna, rolls,
right,
produce that not only were taking up space, because it's not a huge outlet, so it was taking up space in his refrigerator, so he couldn't put more profitable products in there, and they were low profit items that he had multiple SKUs, to your point, that he had to stock to try to sell one low cost item.
And probably a lot of that spoiled because it is perishable. Right. So he's throwing away.
Correct. Product weight,
Correct.
All for low performance to have this menu item. Correct. So it's like, okay, great. Lou Ethel will just have to be mad that the bologna burger, my bologna has a first name, OSCAR. My bologna has a second name, MAYER. Oscar Mayer.
You're showing your way, your age.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen.
But think
that was
about,
like from the 80s, wasn't
it? Think about, okay. Well, think about it like this, too,
I'm nostalgic, not old.
They would rather come back and buy something from you.
Sure.
And so if you keep hanging on to non-profitable products and you eventually go out of business,
that's right.
They're not buying anything from you.
That's right. For sure. Okay. Streamline operations, improve processes to eliminate inefficiencies and reduce labor-intensive tasks.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is where, we talk about, this is why AI is such a big topic all over the world at all sizes of business, is because it can streamline some things for you so that you can free up people to do what they do best.
Yep.
So if you have creative writers and they're doing manual research and you can program AI to do their research for them and take that, you saved them 3 hours. Now they're more effective.
Yeah.
So again, streamlining your processes, what are things that you can do to reduce the amount of non-productive time and increase the amount of productive time?
I like it. Maybe this guy can help me. Willie H been a little light today on the activities there.
Hit the buttons, William.
It really is folks don't know they don't know exactly when we record, but I think there definitely is a difference between end of day energy versus first thing in the morning energy. I think for all parties, maybe there, but
agreed.
All right, so takeaways. Let's give you some actionable takeaways. We're going to wrap up. So, listen, perform a cost audit. So, identify where these things are going, and you'd be amazed at subscriptions.
Yeah.
We'll do this with we have done this more in the past. Our hands are full now with stuff, but in the past, we've gone in and looked and like, hey, this app, you've been paying $25 a month for 3 years.
Right.
Oh yeah, we don't use that. You've been paying $25 a month for 3 years.
Right.
So who's paying attention here?
Correct.
So I think, really identifying those, subscriptions, they've got whole app companies now on the consumer side that does nothing but track, which is very strange to me, that tracks your subscriptions and I'm like, oh, I was so happy that I didn't realize I had 3 Netflix subscriptions. How? That's just dumb.
It is. Yes.
That just doesn't make any sense. So I don't know how that happens, but there's whole systems developed to tracking that kind of stuff. So it might be a perfect time to do that cost audit and know kind of what apps you're using, not using, efficient, or again, redundancies.
Right.
So we'll have this conversation. We'll be in meetings and I'll say, okay, great. Should we, merge this technology together, or do we need this, or do we need that separate, or Is it more efficient even though it's separate because the tools are better apart than somebody's joint tool? Yeah. So like the phone system, Zoom's phone system wasn't that great when they first tried to roll it out, which is why we looked at it in past. But now it fulfills the need. So got the cost audit. We talked about non-essential costs, right?
Correct.
So let's look at eliminating things that don't contribute to growth. That's much smarter, than just cutting out. We're going to cut the advertising, until we get busy, Is that how that works? We're going to cut the advertising until we get busy,
Well, because well, that's a talking about rolling down the hill. But this is something to really take a look at, and we didn't talk about it as much during advertising. This is a great time to say it. Is are you advertising across multiple platforms? Look at the performance of your platforms and recognize, we go back to this all the time. Do you know who your ideal client is? Yep. And are the platforms that you're advertising on reaching your ideal client? And if you've got a platform that's only reaching about 10% of your ideal client, maybe that's a good one to let go and continue to invest in some of the others. You don't have to get rid of all of them.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. Prioritize high ROI investments. So yes, back to that. Focus on marketing, automation, and efficiency. And then finally, stay adaptable.
Yeah.
Be ready to shift spending based on market conditions. Yes. So, take that into consideration when you're taking a deal. A lot of this SaaS companies now, their default is annual. They want annual because they want the revenue now, of course, front load the revenue, but also it helps them significantly with attrition.
Right.
You're less likely to leave if you pay for 12 months. Correct. Now, I just happen to be somebody, I immediately toggle to the monthly until I get comfortable with your product or service.
Right.
So I don't care what your money back guarantee is or all this other stuff, because you also create all these hoops.
Correct.
So yeah, I'm not happy 30 days in. Oh, great. You got to call.
Yeah.
Send supporter requests. Fill out this survey. Like, I don't want to go through all that to try to get a refund. Correct. So be careful. Yes, there are certain things that you want to take advantage of, certain things that aren't going to go, away.
Right.
Or that you probably won't change.
Right.
So that it makes sense to maybe take advantage of some annual savings. But be adaptable. Don't people, like, oh, this is the only way. And it's just not true. You gotta pay attention.
Well, and things move fast, and create a regular assessment. Whatever works for you, whether it's quarterly, biannually, annually, whatever it is, but build in some time so that you can look at your systems. You talk about the client that you worked with that had an app that they paid $25 a month for 3 years.
Right.
Well, what else is in there that you don't know about?
Sure.
So create a platform for yourself, or create a schedule where you can evaluate the things that you're doing, so that, well, maybe it makes sense to get rid of this now, so that we don't get to a point where we have to get rid of it.
That's right. I like it. We're going to leave it there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Get more information on some of the topics that we're talking about. A Position for Growth, available at Amazon, also at CoryMosley.com. It's a great book. I think so. People think so. Maybe you'll think so. You got to hold one up to think so.
Gotta crack that cover.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with a friend. Most of the time, entrepreneurs and small business owners know other small business owners and entrepreneurs. They build that community because, certainly nobody understands this unless you're going through it, and all of the nuances to it. So we encourage you to share it and stream it. We're available anywhere that you like to stream podcasts. So yeah, I encourage that.
Please. Yeah. Thanks for coming, and thanks for coming back. And like you said, next time, bring a friend.
There you go. Bring a friend. Buy 2, 1 for you. You listen. Do a share party.
Well, so take Willie Jolly's advice, right?
Yeah.
Buy a book for you and buy a book for a friend.
That's right.
And then invite that friend to come join us on the podcast.
Yeah, that's right. You. That's right. Join us on the podcast.
There you go.
All right, my friend. It was enjoyable. Another great episode in the can.
A lot of fun.
I'm Cory Mosley. On behalf of myself, LG007, Lon Graham, and Willie H. This has been the Grow Business Podcast. We appreciate your listenership, viewership, and we will see you next week. Willie H., take us out. That's it. I want you. Yeah. That's the Lon. We're gonna call it the Lon. People
Chair
gotta,
dancing.
yeah, you guys got to tune in. You got to watch the YouTube or
Chair dancing.
on CoryMosley.com to see the lawn.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah,
He's dialed in
that's
now.
official. There, that's official. There you go.
100%. Oh, that's
Don't
good.
knuckle bump lawn in person though, because that hurts.
Well, it's much more effective for you in the summertime than it is in the winter.
No, most definitely.
Oh my goodness, that was good.
All right, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Awesome.